Thank you for the click. This is Luxley behind the microphone, and on the day before tomorrow, we're going to present you with Eye of the Storm PvP featuring the overpowered Destruction Warlock, whose name is Malaran. Yes, make no mistake, Destruction Warlocks are overpowered in PvP, but not for the reasons you might think. We'll get into that in a few minutes, but first, I want to talk about, and I'm using a George Bush Jr. word here, so in other words, it's not a real word. I want to talk about strategery in Eye of the Storm. Now, there are three different strategies here. One is you can control two bases and the flag, and if the other team holds two bases and the flag, you should maneuver to get a third base. Matter of fact, hit their weakest base. So that's one very simple strategy. The second one is control three bases, and more often than not, an experienced flag carrier. Keep this in mind because this is very true. An experienced flag carrier with only one base with his team is probably not going to cap. Now, an inexperienced person is just going to run and cap it, but let's bet that the person's experienced, so you don't necessarily have to worry about the other team capping. They're going to live to the hope that they can get two bases before he caps. But in this situation, you don't even have to kill the flag carrier. All you have to do is slow him down. Now, the third strategy is a very complex strategy, and it's something that requires a ton of coordination. You can't use it in RBGs. That reason will be evident in a minute or two. And oh, by the way, thanks for playing as this poor guy got chaos bolted and lightning lasted to death. Yeah, I really feel sorry for him. The third strategy here, it's not going to work in RBGs for evident reasons, but it can work in randoms if everyone understands and subs to the plan, which is almost impossible in any given random situation. Now, you hold two bases, but only until the control is pinned 100% in full towards your possession on the meter. Then you don't even bother guarding the base because it's going to take the enemy team some time to even cap that base. And what you do is, like I said, you don't stand there and guard the bases. Your goal here is to put consistent, overwhelming pressure on enemy bases. So you're constantly picking on the weakest enemy base. And if you're executing this correctly, you're going to consistently hold two bases, and the enemy team is only going to hold one bases, and it's going to create a hell of a lot of confusion as to what you're doing. Of course, this requires everybody on board. If the other team is capping, it's going to create confusion just simply because they're not going to know what base to go to, and they could be approaching a base that they hold, and then suddenly they don't hold it anymore, or approaching a contested base and then suddenly you hold that base. So yes, it's going to create a lot of confusion, but that confusion can backfire as well, because complexity does equal confusion, but it can backfire if your team doesn't understand the concept of constantly maneuvering and zerging and taking control of a new base every few minutes or so. Then it's going to end, the complexity and confusion is going to go against you. So I hope that's clear. If you have any questions, I'll certainly answer them in the comments, as I often do answer any kind of questions or any kind of comments. I enjoy doing it. What can I say? Now, flexibility is the key. And I want to point out that the best strategies or strategeries are always, and they always will be, doing what the other team is not doing, going where the other team isn't. I mean, it's that simple, folks. And I keep drilling home this point, and people are like, yeah, well, you don't love 2400 rating in Arena, so what do you know? Well, we're talking about BGs. We're not talking about Arena, right? And the other thing is, well, you don't have 2400 in RBGs. You know what? It doesn't take 2400 rating to understand what's smart and just simply to go where the other team isn't. Willie Keeler, an old baseball player, used to say, hit them where they ain't, and that is the best strategy. And it always infuriates me when players like, okay, we got to have this one strategy. We got to stick to this strategy no matter what. We're sticking to this. That's fine. If you have the ability to execute it, great. But what ends up happening more often than not, when you're not executing it, players will still force the issue. And then seconds turn to minutes. Next thing you know, 10 minutes go by and you're losing. You're losing, and you're losing bad because you're forcing something. You're forcing a square peg into a round hole, and it's just not working. It just doesn't work. So you can try to have a plan and stick with it, but you got to back away from it when it's not working and simply go where they're not. Which reminds me of a very, very funny story. Back in the day when internet dating first started propping up, I went on a ton of internet dates because, I don't know, I used to like going on them. Anyway, you never know. You meet a friend, new girlfriend, whatever. A lot of good things can happen. So I used to go out, just simple stuff, go out for drinks, whatever. And let's say I'm talking to this girl. Her name is Priscilla. No relation to Priscilla Presley. And she starts telling me this story about this guy that she dated. She really liked him. They hit it off for drinks, ended up having dinner. Then they went back to his place. Now, I don't recommend you do this for various reasons, but for a woman who's pretty smart, okay, to go back to a guy's place on a first date means she really digs him. Really digs him. Woman is just not going to be like, I'm not so sure about him. First date, going back to his place. She digs him. So she goes back to his place, and he excuses himself, and he comes out after about 5 or 10 minutes, totally naked. Just totally naked, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Just butt naked. So she got gone. She was gone in a matter of seconds. Now, the interesting thing is, I went on a few other dates with a few other women, and they all told a very similar story. They all lived within a 10-mile radius or 15-mile radius of each other. So it got me wondering, somewhere out there, there's a dude who thinks inviting women back to his apartment, disappearing for 5 minutes, and coming out with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and no clothes on works. He thinks this works. Because I must have run into about 3 or 4 women that told the same exact story, and they all lived within a general area. There's a guy out there that actually thinks this works, and that's the thing about people. When something works, they stick with it, even if it was that 1 out of 10 times that it actually worked. And that's what happens in BGs, people. Something works, and God knows why it works. And I'm not saying some plans are dumb. It's just you can win by holding 2 bases. You could win by holding 3 bases. You could win by rotating and zerging and not guarding bases. It's just a matter of execution, and it's a matter of what the other team is doing. That's what you really have to pay attention to. But people just have it in their mind, there's only one way to do this, and that infuriates me. And that common thread is stitched throughout World of Warcraft with no matter what you're doing. So I thought that was a good analogy. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But here in the eye of the storm, we're doing pretty well. Looks like we're holding 2 bases, they're holding 2 bases, and we've been running the flag with some success. So it seems like we're kind of stitched into that first strategy. Now what I was talking about, Warlocks, Destruction Warlocks. Let's talk Warlocks in general, because I am working on a Warlock guide, which I've been working on for about a year. But no, it's really moving along very nicely. I'm working on a Demonology Warlock guide, because I think Demonology is the most fun to play, just simply by the pressing buttons and what you're doing and the whole RP value of it. Destruction is a lot of fun too, because you're literally deleting people off the map. And Destruction works very well in Arena when you're working with an Elemental Shaman or even a Fire Mage, because they also have that big ability that can do serious damage. And when any given team is facing 2 people like that, in other words, Lightning Lasso and Chaos Bolt, or Chaos Bolt and Greater Pyro, that's a devastating combination. Very devastating combination. So here's the real reason why Destruction Warlocks are overpowered, in my opinion, is not necessarily the big damage that Chaos Bolts do. You can see big damage with Rets if they get all their whammies up and they're right on top of you. You can see big damage from Elemental Shaman. You can see big damage from Fire Mages. The real reason I think that Destruction is a bit overpowered is Conflagulate. Because when you use the PvP talent with the root to it, you're talking about getting a ranged root or 2 ranged roots every 12 seconds, which is even better than what most druids can do. I mean, they do have mass entanglement if they choose the talent, but it's better than entangling roots. Your cooldown is very short, and it is ranged, and there's no cast time, and it does damage, and it can't be broken. So it's essentially a better root than druids, and this is really what's key to the game. What's wrong with the game right now in general is, it makes Destro Warlocks extremely strong. And then when you add Demon Armor, which is another PvP talent that increases your stamina and increases your armor, but it only increases your armor to slightly better than leather armor, so it's not as good in that regard as people might think. But this is what's wrong with the game. How is it that a Destruction Warlock has a better root than a Balanced Druid? How is it that a Destruction Warlock has a better root than Frost Nova in most cases? It just baffles me. It just really, really baffles me. And then you have other things like, why is it that as a demo lock, for example, your pet is pretty much everything, much like a BM Hunter. But as a demo lock, if you want to heal your pet, you got to channel it and stand there and be subject to being interrupted, and it also costs you health to do it. Whereas if you're a BM Hunter, all you got to do is press a button that's instant, and it heals your pet. These are the things that just baffle me about the game, and we are in a position where we definitely, without a question, need some sort of class design, not only that makes the game more compelling and fun, but creates or moves the needle a little bit more towards the fairness area. Fairness when comparing against other classes that are similar to you when you're on the offensive, and even fairness as far as who it is you have to face. We're never going to get balance, but we can get some sort of semblance of fairness. And I've always been an advocate of that, and hopefully when Blizzard does revisit class design, we get some of that, or who knows what we're going to get. We know Blizzard's going to revisit it and redo it, but we don't know to what extent. We don't know if they're going to address a lot of the issues that truly need to be addressed. We'll see. It's a coin flip as far as I'm concerned. On the negative side, Blizzard has a long track history of saying they're going to do something and then not doing it, or doing it and not doing it effectively is probably a better way of putting it. And they also have a track record now where they can, recently they did WoW Classic, and they can take the elements of WoW Classic, things that drew people to WoW Classic, made WoW Classic interesting to the player base, and take those mechanisms and systems and implement them into the current game. I'm really getting confusing, but this is Luxley saying, whatever it is by you, whether it's morning or it's afternoon or it's night, make it epic.